host, sabrinasalvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. Sabrina Salvati. Doobie-doobie-doo. 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 I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. All right. Welcome to Sabby Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. My special guest tonight is Lee Camp. He's the comedian and he's also the host of Moment of Clarity with Lee Camp. Welcome back, Lee. Thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, Lee, I wanted to start off by talking about this war with Russia and Ukraine. I mean, obviously, this is a big topic, I think, for like the past year and a half. It was just, I think, a couple of weeks ago, there was a whistleblower who released documents from the Pentagon, leaked documents on Discord, and I think maybe some other platforms as well. And one of the pieces of information that was released is that the United States government had actually no intention of trying to come to some sort of peace resolution with this war this year. And I want to get your take on that and this whistleblower, so to speak, which I was kind of skeptical about. I didn't believe that a 21-year-old did this. I felt like maybe he was taking the fall for someone else. But I want to get your take on that. What do you think about the U.S. government not really moving towards any type of peace resolution with this war?
Well, it's what a lot of us were saying in the first few months, that the U.S. had sought to end the peace negotiations that were ongoing between the Zelensky government and Russia, and that when they were at their closest point of actually signing something, that it would have ended, within a month of it beginning. Boris Johnson, who was still prime minister then, and in his clown car, went rolling up to Ukraine and basically told Zelensky that, A, to end any peace talks, and B, even if he were to sign something, his Western backers would not back him any longer. So it was basically like, you have no choice. There's no way you can sign a peace agreement that will allow you to actually hold that agreement. And so, yeah, the U.S. has been doing that since the beginning, making sure this goes on essentially as long as possible. I mean, now you're seeing a bit of a rift in the ruling elite, where there is a faction of ruling elite who are equal war criminals, but a faction of them that want to see this wrapped up because they see that it's actually harming the U.S. empire, speeding the great splitting of the world's economies. And Kissinger among them, So if you need a better war criminal credentials for someone telling the U.S. to wrap this up quickly, and in terms of the questioning the whistleblower and the leaks, I myself was skeptical at first, because generally when there is a legitimate leak of documents, the mainstream media first avoids covering it at all when it's harmful to the U.S. But the reason we have now learned is the mainstream media was basically running interference to try and get most of America to focus on specific areas of these leaks and to ignore the most many of the most important leaks in these documents. So the mainstream media was doing a job to try to minimize the harm done to the U.S. empire. And these leaks, I've done episodes on now. It's not that there's no articles on some of the more important leaks; it's that they're really minimized. I mean, the fact that that the U.S. is spying on our allies, including Israel, the fact that U.S. allies are jumping ship, including Egypt, had actually considered sending 40,000 munitions to Russia. It's unclear whether they ever did it. It seems likely they didn't do it, but the fact that they were even considering that behind America's back shows how much American power has waned over the past many years. But most importantly, I think out of these leaks was we learned that months ago, we nearly entered nuclear war. I mean, Russia nearly shot down and actually fired a missile at what turned out to be a British spy plane, meaning Russia actually either attempted, or there's some confusion as to whether it was an accident, but either way, they were aiming and firing at a British spy plane, which if they had hit it, who knows where we'd be right now? Like, the fact that the US and the UK would put us into this proxy war that puts us on the brink of nuclear war is insanity. It is. These are. I think we need a word that means sociopath moron. Sociomoron, sociopath moron. Something that we need some word for that, because that's what these people are. They're sociopaths and they're morons at the same time, and it's endangering all of us.
100%. And I know you mentioned the economy. One of the things that has not worked out the way that the U.S. government thought it would was harming Russia with economic sanctions, right? So it turns out that the sanctions that they've implemented on Russia is actually harming other countries. I talked about the UK before, how they couldn't pay for heat. So they set up these facilities called warm banks that people could go to get heat if they couldn't afford to pay for their heat bill because of the pipeline. I talked about the struggle that was going on in Germany a couple of months ago when people told me that Germany would be fine. A couple of days ago, I just reported on the fact that Germany has now officially entered a recession, and they are the fourth largest economy in the world. And then also on the other side of this is that you have BRICS, which now actually has other countries that are interested in joining BRICS. And Saudi Arabia in particular, I think, is one that I'm surprised the Biden administration seems to be kind of silent about this. But Saudi Arabia, which has been a pretty strong partner of the United States, particularly because of oil, even they have decided to move in a direction in reference to BRICS, trying to make some type of partnership with China. And you would think that the US government would say, okay, wait a minute, what's going on here? But it just seems like, to me, for the Biden administration, it seems like it's not even a significant factor. What's your take on that, about other countries trying to say, you know what, from now on, we're not going to listen to what the US government is doing. We're going to start our own thing, and we're going to try to be a significant power in the world?
Oh, behind closed doors, they're shitting themselves. They are absolutely doing everything they can to stop BRICS. First of all, to stop a competitor to the petrodollar central banking system, which Saudi Arabia is the key partner in the petrodollar continuing. And for anyone who, doesn't realize it, the reason we can print unlimited money, which we do, and it still keeps its power, it doesn't become meaningless, is because it's the petrodollar, because oil from OPEC is sold mainly in US dollars, which also makes it the world reserve currency. So many countries have their reserve money in dollars. And that's what gives us the ability to just print endless money. And we increased the monetary supply in the US by 20% just during the pandemic. In any other country, or most other countries, the money would become borderline meaningless if you did that. But the U.S. can do it because of the petrodollar. So, yeah, they are totally shitting themselves. And in terms of, and this connects to that portion of the answer, but in terms of how much this proxy war has harmed, which, by the way, for those who aren't sure, many higher ups in the U.S. ruling elite have called it a proxy war, including Leon Panetta, former head of the CIA, said on TV, this is a proxy war. But the harming to European economies is not actually an accident. It is part of what this was intended to do. Now, many of the sanctions have boomeranged and harming the U.S. too, which was not intended. But in terms of harming European states and pushing them back into a vassal system underneath the United States, that is a large percentage of what this proxy war was meant to do, among other things. But we were very upset. The U.S. empire was very upset at the allying of Russia with Germany and the economic cooperation, which obviously Nord Stream was a huge part of. So the U.S. has now bombed that pipeline, cut off economic ties between Russia and Europe, which that was part of what we wanted, what our government wanted, and has succeeded at. But also harming European economies. It doesn't matter if people are freezing at night. Like, the U.S. doesn't care. The goal of the U.S. government was to push much of Europe back into a vassal system underneath the United States, and we've largely done that. I mean, much of Europe is now just doing whatever the U.S. says, including Germany, one of the most powerful nations in that bloc. And Germany is suffering and yet still going along with what the U.S. has said. Germany hasn't even done an investigation of who blew up their goddamn pipeline. I mean, how is that? It's insane. It's insane that they would do that. But of course, I guess it's testament to the fact the U.S. still has a lot of power and Germany is still under the U.S. thumb. But so those parts have been a success for the U.S. in this proxy war, this absolutely lunatic level proxy war. But much of it has not been a success, it has caused many countries, Russia, China, many others, to run towards BRICS, to run away from the petrodollar. We have shown by stealing Russia's assets that were outside Russia and stealing Venezuelan assets that were outside Venezuela or were in US dollars and stealing some other countries' assets, Afghanistan, it has shown to many countries that have dollar reserve currencies, oh, shit, we can't trust that this money will be there. All we have to do is slightly go against the U.S. and they can just steal all our money. And so many countries are, like you said, running to the BRICS cooperation, group that are coming together. They're joining their economies. And there's been many sales now in oil outside of the petrodollar, in petro yuan, for example. And so this is a big deal. This is honestly, I think we'll look back at this and we'll say, well, this was the beginning of the end of the American empire, which in many ways could be a good thing, but I don't support any war. So I'm not going to support a war that kills tens of thousands of Ukrainians and creates millions of refugees either. So.
What do you think is going to happen to Ukraine when this war officially ends? Because my prediction is that their economy is going to be destroyed. I'm looking at countries like Yemen. Look at how Yemen looks today. It's terrible. Like nobody can live there. And even after the war is over, then you still have to deal with the environmental catastrophes. People still have to breathe that air. And I think people don't think about that as well. What do you think is going to happen to that country when this officially ends?
I mean, I think probably what it'll be most similar to is Iraq, where, we go in, we destroy a country beyond all recognition, and then we help them rebuild, which means sell off their assets, their resources, put in some sort of puppet government. I mean, I guess we got one in there right now. And Ukraine has already signaled that they're ready to sell off all their resources, to sell off their infrastructure, even to the point that Zelensky has rang the opening bell on the stock market in the U.S. via video and said Ukraine's open for business. Well, what does open for business mean on the U.S. stock exchange? It means these massive companies can buy up our assets, our resources. These are resources that should be given to the Ukrainian people. They should not be sold to giant corporations that obviously will go after profit over all else, no matter how much it harms people. The people of Ukraine, the people of the world, doesn't matter. If there's profit there, they'll grab it up. He's selling off infrastructure, including transportation. And so I think that's what the U.S. wants. But the question is whether, this rift in the ruling elite will mean that this war wraps up, at least the most destructive aspects of it wraps up sooner rather than later, or whether the U.S., what many of the ruling elite all want is for kind of an endless war that just continues to drain Russia. So that is also something that many of these U.S. sociopaths, many of our governmental sociopaths want to happen.
Yeah, I hear you. What's your take on, so obviously the elections are coming up. We're heading into 2024. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Has spoke out tremendously in reference to this war, but other wars as well. But there are some issues also with RFK Jr. I interviewed Marianne Williamson. We talked to her about this particular war. She said at that point in time that we should still support Ukraine monetarily. That was at that point in time. I think her position has changed a little bit since then. When we go into the 2024 election, how important do you think where a candidate stands on this particular issue is going to matter to voters?
Well, first of all, and I talk about I've talked about this primary as well, so I'm not criticizing you. So, but I always like to begin with the caveat of, why are we talking about the election already? It's so insane, and I do it too. So I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying, like, we have these elections once every 4 years, and we spend 2.5 years talking about them, and you and I don't, but much of the mainstream media uses that to then cover every other issue that should be talked about in the world. I think people should spend about 5% of their time discussing this. But anyway, beyond that, I also do have thoughts. Marianne Williamson, I think she's good on some things. I think she's one of the few candidates in the last election on the Democratic side that actually talked about maybe we should actually spend money towards peace rather than war. There are some important things she says, but there's a lot of things that leave me wanting in many ways. I believe she said the U.S. should stay in Afghanistan to protect the women, which is one of the dumbest. We need to keep dropping bombs to protect and killing innocent women to protect the women. That's interesting. But anyway, in terms of RFK, he is really fascinating in my view, because he is grabbing so many third rails of American politics. You cannot talk about the wars the way he has. You can't talk about corporations running the government the way he has. You can't talk about the environmental destruction the way he has. You can't talk about factory farming or big pharma the way he has. So there's so many third rails that he has grabbed. He also has I don't know if he said the exact sentence, the CIA murdered my uncle, but he's essentially said it in many ways. And so he says that. Now, then he also leaves you a little bit confused as to his tweets about the CIA is mainly filled with wonderful, brave folks such as my daughter-in-law. And you're kind of like, wait, a second ago they killed your uncle. What? What happened? But that being said, I am very impressed with many of the third rails he's grabbed. I also, and I would like to raise this alarm early if people want to start thinking about this, that of course they're going to do all of the tricks that they did to rig it against Bernie Sanders in 2016. Really, none of that has changed. All of it will remain the same. They already have begun the maligning of RFK's character to just justify further ways to rig it against him later, even to the point of, it seems, banning channels and banning videos basically for speaking to him, YouTube channels. So the suppression and the attacks have begun in a large way by the mainstream media and others. And so that's step one. But if he were to get further than that and get past all of the ways it's rigged by money, past all the ways it's rigged by black box voting machines, past all the ways it's rigged by super delegates, if he were to get past all of that, since Bernie ran in 2016, the DNC has added a new rule to their bylaws, which says they can eliminate any candidate who is not Democratic enough, whatever that means. They don't define it. So there is now a nuclear option, unless they're going to remove it. There is now a nuclear option where the DNC, no matter what, could just say, you know what? We've watched some of his speeches. We don't think he's really one of us, and they could knock him out. That didn't exist before 2016, but it does now. And so I'm not saying they'll use it, but at the very least, people should be talking about the fact that they now can do that type of thing. And of course, people should be aware of the standard sheepdog model, where you get all of the strong left-wing people who like what RFK is saying together, and then you at the very end of it, you go, too bad I didn't make it. Vote for the Democrat.
Yep. Yep. No, I hear you. I totally hear you. I think another issue that has come up recently, his position in reference to Israel and Palestine, that's a hot button now for people.
With Roger Waters.
Yeah.
He backed away from support of Roger Waters.
Yeah. So I don't know. This is just, it's a mess. Do you think that anyone else will come forward to run?
I'm planning, and this is a big announcement, I'm planning on being the campaign manager for, it's like a grayish brown rock I found in my yard. And I mean, you should see its platform. It's really incredible. And I just hope people will stay tuned to leecamp.net, because I think this stone I found in my yard has a good shot. I mean, especially if he's going up against, multiple war criminals.
I think they're talking about a possibility of Joe Manchin, which is kind of crazy.
As if the Democratic Party could get any more Republican.
No, I know it's crazy. It's crazy. In reference to, I guess I would say not just this issue with Russia and Ukraine, but the money to be made here. Okay, so Zelensky made it very clear that BlackRock is coming into Ukraine. He's working out some type of deal with them. There's a military-industrial complex, which always profits from war. We're seeing billions and billions of dollars go out the door to Ukraine. And I think, at least from my perspective, I think more Americans are starting to wake up to it, and they're starting to ask questions like, wait a minute, you have billions and billions of dollars to give to another country, and yet we're trying to figure out how to pay rent. Or, we're trying to figure out how we're going to pay for groceries. You removed people from Medicaid when you changed the pandemic emergency status. Like, what is happening here? Now, I will say, I think more people are starting to notice that our government has plenty of money, but they choose to spend it in such a way that does not benefit the people. Do you think that will have an impact come 2024, the way that people choose to vote?
I mean, I hope so. I hope people realize that. The U.S. has all the money you can possibly imagine. You cannot even begin to comprehend the amount of money, and especially the amount of money dumped into our military. $1 trillion a year, over $1 trillion if you add the black budget. And $21 trillion, actually more than that now, of unaccounted for financial adjustments in the Pentagon's books. They've failed 5 audits, the only audits they've ever had. And when we say audits, we mean 1,000 people working for a year trying to audit the Pentagon. They have just walked out at the end and said, and they failed the audit. In the last one, last November, they said they couldn't account for half of all their assets. And when I say assets, I don't just mean like guns and things. I mean like buildings and helicopters. They don't know where half of their shit is. If you had any other job and you said, I can't find half of my inventory, you would be in prison. If you sold jewels, or you worked at a store, or you worked at a daycare, and you said, we started with 12 children, I have 7 here, you would be in prison. And the Pentagon does that. Literally, they've admitted they can't account for half their assets. And so anyway, to get back to your question, the point is we dump all this money into this stuff, and we don't have money for healthcare. We don't have money we got to cut food stamps. We got to cut public schools. It's disgusting. It's repulsive. And again, it's sociopathic. And like you said, billions of dollars going to Ukraine, over $100 billion. Seymour Hersh also just a few weeks ago revealed that he's had many sources and evidence that upwards of $400 million has been skimmed off by Zelensky and his crew in the government. Basically, they're just taking their cut. And it's so much, $400 million, that even I believe it was the CIA, has gone to the Ukrainian government and said, this is a bit much that's going missing. Like, we understood we would understand if you took 100 million, but this is 400 million. I mean, that is where our money's going. And meanwhile, everybody here in America, we have 16, 17 million empty houses around this country, and yet people aren't housed. We have 64% of Americans say didn't know how to pay for basic necessities over the past year. And meanwhile, we dump $1 trillion into a military that is just a giant money laundering scheme. It's disgusting. And I hope it influences people's vote in one way or another.
Well said. I want to pivot into the censorship aspect, because obviously this has been a big issue for you and for other commentators and journalists, especially over the past 2 years. I think it's become significantly worse this year. What is your take on the information that has been discovered from the Twitter files? And would you like to see, at least I would like to see a YouTube files. I would like
Yeah.
to see YouTube files or Facebook files, but what's your take on the information that has been uncovered there? And do you consider Elon Musk to be a hero, or do you feel like we should still look at him with a wary eye?
Yeah, well, for those who don't know, I had a TV show for 8 years called Redacted Tonight. A year ago, it was canceled by U.S. sanctions. In that same week, the YouTube channel that we had built to 250,000 subscribers was banned around the world. Over 2,000 videos banned around the world. They're still banned. My podcast, which was not even part of the Redacted Tonight entity, was also banned by Spotify. I've now put it up under a new name, the Lee Camp Show. But and at the same time, for years I've been shadow banned on places like Facebook and Twitter. Now, what you're saying about Twitter files, it absolutely revealed what many of us have been talking about for several years. We just didn't have the proof. We had the numbers proof. We could go, hey, isn't it funny that I used to, gain followers in the thousands, and now I can't seem to scrape two together. So we had that kind of proof, but we didn't have the actual evidence. And so now we do from the Twitter files, which, if you want evidence of how guilty our government is in censoring Twitter and other social media platforms, when this was revealed by Matt Taibbi and others that Elon Musk gave the files to, they've now weaponized the IRS and other entities against Matt Taibbi. The day he released the Twitter files, the IRS opened a file on him. And the day he testified in front of Congress, they went to his house and raided his house. So the IRS is now weaponized against journalists like Taibbi for revealing things like the Twitter files. And like I said, it just absolutely proves what many of us have said, that these social media platforms are essentially an arm of the government. They're so accountable to anything the government wants. And thousands of people, many of them not with popular shows like mine or even well-known at all, have had their pages suppressed, deleted, somehow canceled. And it's both right and left wing, but, a lot of people like to focus on the right wing. But the truth is there's many left wingers, if you're outside of what's acceptable on mainstream media, who have been heavily suppressed and canceled on these social media platforms. And of course, YouTube is another one, and they've been exactly the same. The YouTube CEO, this is a couple of years ago, said in an interview that they had succeeded in decreasing viewing of extremist videos by 70%. Well, what does she consider extremist? Yeah, Nazis. But then what they don't say is they're also throwing in, my stuff. They're also throwing in anybody who's actually anti-war, anyone who actually doubts whether we're just there to help the Ukrainian people. Like, that's considered extremist. So, yeah, they have crushed the views of so many of us. And, we keep struggling. I keep struggling to try and keep talking about the same things I've always been talking about for years now. But the landscape has very much changed. And these social media platforms are more than happy to be at the beck and call of the FBI and the CIA and our intel agencies.
That's right, 100%. I think people have to understand. I know people who weren't even monetized like ever, and they are being suppressed. Like it's a problem. 4 or 5 years ago, also maybe 6 years ago, this was not a big issue. Like, if you were independent and you did political commentary, like, you could grow pretty quickly, especially during election season. Like, you could grow pretty fast. But then YouTube changed their algorithm, and it made it harder to find independent political commentators. And so anyone who came in after that algorithm change has had to find a way to fight against that. Do you think that platforms like Rumble will eventually become to the point where, maybe because they are allowing more free speech content on their platform, where they may eventually overtake a platform like YouTube?
Well, look, I'm at Rumble, rumble.com/Lee Camp. That's where a lot of my live streams are. And there's a lot about them that I like. They are anti-censorship. Obviously, it sucks that the first people to run to the anti-censorship platforms were largely, or 90%, the farthest right wingers. And, I'm no fan of being crazy right wing. But at the same time, it's like YouTube has said to me and anyone who's genuinely anti-war or anti-capitalist or anti-empire that you're not welcome here. So it's like, where are we going to go? We're going to go to the platforms that will allow us to continue to speak the truth. And yeah, I mean, I hope it keeps growing, and hopefully it gets to the point that enough people make the shift that YouTube's not the only game in town. But our government has a lot of ways of stopping these type of things and slowing them down. And, especially without net neutrality anymore, they could, if they ever wanted to, they could legitimately just slow down or literally just slow down the traffic. So you have a tough time loading videos if they wanted to. We need, a lot of work needs to be done to get back to a place where these are free and open squares where people can talk about the issues in a real way, not in a way that's just CNN and Fox News approved talking points. But yeah, so I am on Rumble, and it allows me to grow in a way that YouTube won't. And we haven't mentioned Facebook, but years ago Facebook was my big platform. I had 332, I think, thousand followers. I was gaining like 5,000 a week. And basically the moment the 2016 election happened, you know how many followers I've had since then? I have 332,000 now. So basically I'm not allowed to gain followers. It may tell you followed me, but they're unsubscribing at an equal rate so that I never gain on my size of my Facebook page. Isn't that interesting? That couldn't be intentional, right? That's just a coincidence that I haven't gained a follower in 9 years or 7 years.
Yeah, they'll do that to people. And that being said, my final question for you, Lee, is what advice would you give to someone who's considering starting a political commentary channel or doing independent journalism, given the level of censorship that we have today?
I mean, I would highly recommend that they instead just pick up a drinking habit. I think that's just a far better choice. No, I want people to be doing the same thing as us, which means to be passionate about these issues and to actually look about what's going on in the world and then to speak about what's going on in the world. So I highly encourage them. But I will say that every video you watch on how to do well on YouTube or those things, it doesn't really apply to people who are speaking about these issues. It might apply to someone putting up skateboard or cat videos, but it doesn't apply equally to us. And many times you can see when you're a new channel, I started a new channel 2 years ago or something because I knew my old one was suppressed. And you can see a lot of growth initially because they apparently have not decided yet that you need to be stopped. But then as you continue to grow, it tends to the algorithm, or maybe it's human beings. I don't always know whether something's done by an algorithm or a human being, but you'll see it become very difficult. And it's like trying to run uphill waist deep in mud, no matter what you try. And it really sucks. But I think we still have to use these tools. I'm not one of these people that's like, delete your Facebook, delete your YouTube, because these are tools that can be used by activists and those who want to create change in this world, who want a sustainable and a peaceful world. They are tools that can be used. And the tools, we're up against the largest goddamn power this world has ever seen, the largest military, the largest corporate governance this world has ever seen. And no one said it was going to be easy. And no one said they were just going to let you walk in and change things. So I think keep using the tools, but look to have a lot of tools in that tool bag. Look for a lot of different outlets. Maybe the ones that are not censoring as of yet, and just try and get the message out there in a lot of different places, I guess.
Awesome. Well, Lee, thank you so much for coming on. Where can people find you?
Yeah, leecamp.net is my locals page, which has all my videos. Locals is like Patreon and Facebook kind of combined, but anti-censorship. And then rumble.com/Lee Camp is probably the best place.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Lee.
Thanks so much. Yeah.
All right, guys. Awesome stuff there with Lee. Definitely check him out, guys. He is on Rumble too, so you can choose to watch him over there. You can watch him on YouTube. You'll get more information on Rumble because that's usually where he does most of his live streams. So definitely check Lee out. Lee was one of my early guests. I think the first time he came on this show, like early on. That was before all that crazy stuff started to happen with RT and people lost their shows and all that stuff. So definitely support his work. Okay, Eric, when you get a chance, if you can put the Type VNC in StreamYard, we'll go ahead and shout out patrons and then show that beautiful thumbnail. And then we'll dive into the rest of today's stories. We got some interesting things to talk about today. For a Sunday, we have some interesting topics. All right, shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. Thank you so much for your support. If you're interested in being a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories: Ultimate, Sabinators, Sabsters. Don't forget about those Sabbies. And of course, members. All of their names are listed here. You can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen there on the ticker. And I want to give a special shout out to a new Sabby patron. Over here, we call them newbies. Let's give it up for Gwen Callahir. Whoop, whoop. Whoop, whoop. Thank you guys so much for your support. And I am so excited to tell you guys I can actually read articles today without looking through 2 ring lights. I finally fixed that situation. So I'm super, super excited about that. And then we'll go ahead and show this beautiful thumbnail and we'll get started there. I'm trying to move this Type VNC over to the other monitor. I hate my monitor sometimes because I'm trying to move this out of my way and I can't get it out of my way. But sometimes I have to hold and drag. There we go. Okie doke. Sorry about that, Eric. I was trying to hold and drag that. Let's go ahead and share that thumbnail and then we'll go ahead and get into today's topics. All right. Tonight, we are discussing, of course, Lee Camp was just here. We're also going to discuss Max Blumenthal grills Rachel Maddow. If you haven't seen that event, it's pretty epic. We're going to go into that and we're going to do a little bit of a history lesson about where Rachel Maddow stood in reference to Russiagate. We're also going to discuss Dr. Umar Johnson Black vote. Everybody needs to hear this, especially if you consider yourself to be a Democrat Party loyalist. You might need to hear this wake-up call. And we're also going to discuss Ohio ballot initiative wins, continuing on with our ballot measure series. So let's go ahead and get into the first story. We are heading into the 2024 election. The Democratic Party is facing some difficulties because 70% of voters do not want Joe Biden to run again. He's already announced that he is running again. He has 2 primary challengers, RFK Jr. and Marianne Williamson so far, but he is still leading in the polls because, of course, I think most Democrat voters feel more comfortable going with the incumbent president. I also don't really know about those polls, so to speak, because I think more people are actually unhappy with Biden's job, but those people have not been polled. Typical. If you don't have a landline, they, for the most part, don't reach out to you, which would be a lot of people, a part of my generation. We don't have landlines. I think the only other person I know that has a landline is like my parents, my friends' parents, grandparents, like that kind of thing. But Dr. Umar Johnson, he has some interesting points. Some of the things that he talks about, I do not agree with. But I think he's 100% correct when it comes to Black people voting for the Democratic Party. I want to give a quick shout out to Case Study QB for this clip. Now, he had an interview recently on Roundaway podcast talking about electoral politics in the Black community. And I think everyone needs to pay attention to this, because maybe this time around, maybe 2024, this will be the wake-up call for people. We'll have to see. But shout out to Case Study QB for this clip. Listen to what Dr. Umar says about Black voters.
You don't believe in voting, so how?
No, I believe in voting when I have something to vote for.
Okay.
The issue with electoral politics and Black people, whether it's America, Africa, or the Caribbean, is we often have nothing to vote for. And the reason we often have nothing to vote for is this party and its so-called antagonists, this party, are both financed by that Chinese man. They're both financed by that white man.
Yeah.
They're both financed by that East Indian. So they got everybody running around Jamaica, who you going to vote for? Running around the United States of America, who you going to vote for? Running around South Africa, who you going to vote for? When at the end of the day, no matter who wins, he wins because he financed both campaigns. I'm not against voting, but I will only vote when you give me a reason.
Okay.
Let's take voting in America.
Let's pause here for just a second. I want you to pay attention to watch the expression on the host's face when Dr. Umar says what he says. Watch this.
Politics and Black people, whether it's America, Africa, or the Caribbean, is we often have nothing to vote for. And the reason we often have nothing to vote for is this party and its so-called antagonists, this party, are both financed by that Chinese man. They're both financed by that white man.
Yeah.
They're both financed by that East Indian. So they got everybody running around Jamaica, who you going to vote for? Running around the United States of America, who you going to vote for? Running around South Africa, who you going to vote for? When that
This piece right here, let's go back to the beginning. It's the very beginning when he starts off the conversation by saying, so you don't believe in voting. And this is sometimes where people will take the conversation if you say, no, I'm not going to support the Democratic Party, particularly if you're a Black voter and you say, I'm not going to support the Democratic Party. One or two responses usually happen. One response is, oh, so you don't believe in voting? Or the other response is, oh, so you want the Republicans to win? And so I'm glad he broke this down, but look at the expression on his face. Watch.
You don't believe in voting, so how?
No, I believe in voting when I have something to vote for.
Okay.
See? So this is the thing. It's like, this is the piece, I think, where there is a disconnect between the vote blue, no matter who, and non-voters and people who just feel like, what is this all for, right? People who are the vote blue, no matter who, those Democrat loyalists, to them, it doesn't make any sense not to come out and support the Democratic Party. It just doesn't make any sense to them when you make these kind of statements. And I know I've had these conversations with the vote blue, no matter who people, okay? It can be very frustrating sometimes. But I think you need to ask yourself, what are you getting in return for that vote, right? Some people, especially for 2020, they stood in line for hours waiting to vote for Joe Biden. For 2020, some people stood in line for, especially in Atlanta. I have a couple friends that live in Atlanta. They were texting me like, I've been in line for 10 hours. And I live in Massachusetts. So like, for me, it's very quick here. I go in, I go out. Like, I don't have to wait this long, like that kind of thing. But there were people waiting for 10 hours. 10 hours to vote for this guy. Most of them just basically coming out so that they would not get Trump. And when you vote with that type of mentality, you're not stopping and thinking, what am I going to get in return, right? You're not getting a return on your investment, but you're out there and you're doing it because you're afraid of what is going to happen if the other side wins. And the Democratic Party has been doing this for a long time. They know by now that a lot of people have Trump derangement syndrome. And so all they have to do is give you the fear of, oh, but you might get Trump again. Whoa, but you might get Ron DeSantis. But at the end of the day, in reference to what Dr. Umar is saying, at the end of the day, you still get corporate money winning. Corporations win, the military industrial complex wins, Wall Street wins, and we lose, regardless if it's a Republican or it's a Democrat that wins the presidential race. Let's go on.
The issue with electoral politics and black people, whether it's America, Africa, or the Caribbean, is we often have nothing to vote for. And the reason we often have nothing to vote for is this party and its so-called antagonists, this party, are both financed by that Chinese man. They're both financed by that white man. Yeah. They're both financed by that East Indian. So they got everybody running around Jamaica, who you going to vote for? Running around the United States of America, who you going to vote for? Running around South Africa, who you going to vote for? When at the end of the day, no matter who wins, he wins because he financed both campaigns.
Bingo. And this is why we continue to lose. And I see Collins in the chat. Thank you so much for saying this. Or what about your ancestors who weren't able to vote? That's another thing that people will say to black voters or black people who choose, no, I'm going to sit this one out. I'm not going to participate, or I'm going to vote third party. That's another thing that people will say to me, but your ancestors fought for the right for you to vote. True. But I'm pretty sure that my ancestors will want me to vote for someone who's actually going to help the people, not someone who's going to help corporations or Wall Street. Politics was different back then. You didn't have super PACs back then, guys. This is the response that you give to people when they tell you this, when they give you this line. When they tell you, but your ancestors fought for you for the right to vote. Yes, this is true. But my response to that is, politics was different back then. There were no super PACs. We didn't have this issue with super delegates. The people actually had more of a voice. But now you have this political system that's set up in such a way where both of these parties are corporate. They're both owned. You know, you have Democrat politicians where the Democratic Party used to be for the working people. Democrat politicians, they're coming straight out of like Goldman Sachs, coming right out of it. So this is why, and I continue to say this, like, don't come at me with that, man. Don't come at me with that bullshit. Let's go on.
Not against voting, but I will only vote when you give me a reason. Okay. Let's take voting in America. Black people in America never get anything when they vote. So how do they motivate us to vote if we never get nothing when we do?
Is that true? What do we ask for? Okay, let's think about some of the things that we've been asking for. Defunding the police. Did the Democrat politicians defund the police? No, they decided to give the police more money. And people still went out and supported them in the midterms. What else? What else? Haven't black voters asked for reparations? Democratic Party want to give you reparations? No. In fact, I'm going to show you a video of Clyburn laughing in your face. So the point that he's making here, and I think we need to take this to heart, you don't just go out and vote just because you were told to do so, or just because you're afraid of the other party. You go out to vote with demands. Have a list of demands. Everybody else has demands, man. Wake up, people. My friends that are Latino American, they have demands. I'm not going to support your reelection if you don't do this for my community. Everybody got demands but us. Everybody's like, and then it's like the times when we did have those demands of defunding the police, when we have the demands of reparations, the demands don't hold if you still participate and vote for them anyway, regardless if they're not going to give it to you. And they know, the Democratic Party, they know they can do this with the black community. That's why they continue to do it. They have convinced a lot of us that things are going to be so much worse with the Republican Party, so we have no choice but to support them. But now it's gotten to the point where they have even started to push our issues aside, minus a few virtue signaling here and there, to push our issues aside to pander to white suburbia. That's how Joe Biden was able to win Georgia. He went to recruit people in white suburbia. When's the last time you saw them coming to the inner city? They're not doing this anymore. People really have to pay attention. Let's go on. He says more.
Fear. Black people are the only constituency in this country who vote out of fear. So how do they motivate us to vote if we never get nothing when we do? Fear. Black people are the only constituency in this country who vote out of fear. In other words, I'm not voting to stop police brutality because they're not going to stop it. I'm not voting to change mass incarceration. They're not going to change it. I'm not voting to fix the schools. They're never going to fix them. So what you voting for? Because I'm afraid of what Trump might do. You see that? That's how we vote. Fear. Now, when the Jews go to the polls, when the Latinos go to the polls, when the Arabs, the East Indians, the Anglo-Saxons go to the polls, they're going for concessions. I'm getting something out of this vote.
They're asking for concessions and they're asking for demands. And everybody should do that. That's the thing. Like, everybody should ask for something. Why do you need to go stand in line for 10 hours, 12 hours, 14 hours, and you get nothing in return? Nothing. What happened to the student debt cancellation that Joe Biden said that he would give to African-American students that went to HBCUs? What happened to that? You know, that just flew right under the radar. Not happening. Not happening, people. And what kills me is come next year, people will still come out to support him. Still come out to support him. Because of why? Because of fear. This is how they keep us voting for the same people over and over. And this includes congressmen and women too, not just the presidential election. This is how they keep us in this cycle of poverty, like never getting anything. This is exactly how. It's a hot mess.
I'm getting something that we already agreed upon before election day. Black people are getting nothing. We vote out of fear. Our motivation is fear. Joe Biden may do nothing for you, but Donald Trump will be worse. See how that works? This is how they get us out. The black man is the only one in the voting line voting because he's scared of what the other man might do to him.
The other people they already got something coming to them already.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Now, I think everybody really need to take that to heart. Are you doing it out of fear? Is that a good reason to show up? The Democratic Party is not doing too well, not just in reference to the Biden administration, but when we look at Black voters, there was already a shift that was starting to happen with 2020. Look at this. Now, Al Sharpton, I know what you're thinking. Oh, God, not Al. Al Sharpton was actually one of the people who gave the warning sign. Now, listen to this. This is from The Guardian. Al Sharpton warns Democratic leaders of waning Black electorate support. Can't say you didn't know. Reverend Al Sharpton has warned Democratic leaders that they must step up the party's appeal to African-American voters or risk Donald Trump or other Republican leaders making greater inroads with the Black electorate in the run-up to the 2024 presidential election. In other words, more Black Democratic voters may shift towards the Republican Party if the Democratic Party doesn't give Black voters a return on their investment. This has already started. He goes on to say, as incremental as it was, Trump and the Republicans made some increases among Black male voters. We didn't see that coming. We need to be really very careful not to ignore that. Now, I disagree with this statement. We did not see that coming. I saw that coming. Because see, what happens is that people like Al Sharpton and other hosts on MSNBC, they stay in a bubble. Like, they're not actually talking to the people. They're talking to people that were part of Hillary Clinton's campaign. Look at who they bring onto the shows. Look at who Morning Joe brings onto their show. So-and-so, former advisor to Hillary Clinton. So-and-so, Hillary Clinton surrogate. Meet so-and-so, worked on the Hillary Clinton campaign. These are the people that they talk to. They're not talking to people that work at Dunkin' Donuts. They're not talking to the people that work at Domino's. They're not talking to your everyday mailman. They're not talking to those people. They don't know what those people want. And I know that they're not talking to those people because if they had been talking to them, then they would have known how Black voters were starting to feel. They're talking to the Oprah Winfrey types. They're talking to people who are in that DNC Democratic blue dog bubble. Not the everyday people. When's the last time you saw a Morning Joe host leave their desk and go out in the street and talk to the people? When do you see this happen? You see that happen? Do you see them go into like Black communities and interview people on the street? No, they bring in people who are like them. Let's go on. Black voters were critical to Joe Biden's success in 2020, both in securing the Democratic nomination and his victory in the November general election. Partly in recognition of such support, the president is proposing that South Carolina, a state with the majority Black Democratic electorate, should be promoted to the first nominating contest. So this article was written right after the midterms. This article was written in December. So obviously we know they already made that decision in reference to South Carolina. But listen to this piece. Exit polls from 2020 presidential contests suggested that Trump increased his support among Black men by 6 points over his 2016 performance. This is the key piece that people need to look at. In 2020, exit polls show that Donald Trump increased his support among Black men by 6 points. This was during the pandemic, guys. During the pandemic, when we were already starting to enter into economic issues at that point in time, it got worse after, but we were already starting to enter into economic issues. During the pandemic, Black male voter support increased for Donald Trump. What does that tell you? This was after his 2016 performance. This right here should have been a big signal to the Democratic Party. Let's go on. That increase was recorded despite Trump's hostile stances towards minority groups during his term in the White House, including the travel ban on immigration from Muslim-majority countries, attacks on prominent Black leaders, and flirtation with white supremacist organizations. Sharpton commented in 2019 that Trump had particular venom for people of color. But what this shows you is that even the commentary from people like Al Sharpton and MSNBC, even that didn't stop those voters from shifting towards Donald Trump. More detailed studies of 2020 voting patterns done by the Pew Research Center and AP Votecast found the increase in Trump support among Black voters to be less pronounced, rising from 6% of the Black vote in 2016 to 8% in 2020. The shift was much more marked among Hispanic Americans, with Trump's share of that desperate electorate increasing from 28% to 38% over the 4 years. Sharpton talked to The Guardian ahead of the cinematic release of Loudmouth, a new documentary of his life and civil rights battles. So he goes on to say here, Sharpton said that his own conversations led him to believe that a small slice of the Black electorate remain amenable to Trump's politics, and that should be an issue for Democratic leaders. When I go around nationally, people might say they are a little bit more conservative, especially Black men. But why is that, ladies and gentlemen? 9 times out of 10, that's on economic issues. These are things people need to start thinking about. Some of Trump's appeal could be down to misogyny, Sharpton suggested. I get it on my radio show. A Black woman appointed to Supreme Court justice, a Black woman as vice president. What about Black men? Sharpton said he also perceived some disconnect, for example, between black male voters in Georgia and the gubernatorial candidacy of Stacey Abrams, the Democratic challenger who lost in this year's midterms to incumbent Republican Governor Brian Kemp. Weeks before the November election, there was reportedly concern with the Abrams camp that her support among black men had softened since she previously ran against Kemp, narrowly losing in 2018. But I showed you the polls after she lost, and the polls showed you that black men actually did come out and support Stacey Abrams. But I want to say where I think the disconnect may have been for some. It's this elitist, condescending, snobby attitude. And Stacey Abrams has it. And a lot of other people have it too. We're going to show you how Rachel Maddow has it too in just a minute. It's that attitude. It's the same attitude that Jim Clyburn has. This attitude that, how dare you question my motives? How dare you question what I can and can't do? I'm smarter than you. I got to where I am. I deserve to be here. And what people need to understand is that that type of attitude does not carry over well, particularly with working class people, with poor people. You cannot talk to people that way. That may work in this blue dog Democratic Party bubble where you're talking to other lawyers and you're talking to doctors, you're talking to professional managerial class individuals. It works in that setting. It does not work in the setting when you are going into the inner city, you are going into lower income neighborhoods, particularly predominantly African American, and you speak to them the same way that you speak to your lawyer friends. That does not work. You have to talk to people and with people. People can tell when you're talking at them. And it's a turnoff. Hillary Clinton made the same mistake. Calling people deplorables, that prudish, condescending, I know better than you, I have more experience than you, I'm more educated than you attitude. It does not carry over well with working class people. And that is something that the Democratic Party needs to hear. That attitude, it does not carry over well. We're going to go on a little bit more here. This piece here. Sharpton, now MSNBC host, urged Democratic leaders to focus more directly on the concerns of Black voters. They are doing better, but they're not doing what's best. I want to see them do even more. The party must show not how smart it is, but how committed it is. And here's the nail on the head right here. Not how smart you are. When you go into the Rust Belt, when you're going into rural America, where people are making $7.15 an hour, nobody cares that you went to Harvard. This is just a reality. No one cares about your degrees. They don't care about your profession. They want to know, what are you going to do if they vote for you that's going to help people in their community, particularly financially as well? That's what they want to know. They don't want to know who you knew in law school, who you rubbed elbows with. They don't care about that. And there used to be a time where the Democratic Party didn't particularly care about those things so much either, but things have changed. And then what makes things worse is when you have politicians that are Black that also have that condescending, snobby attitude. How dare you tell me what I need to do? And no one does that better than Jim Clyburn. There's a clip here I want you to see. Now, this is from Philip Scott channel, showing just that arrogant, condescending attitude of Jim Clyburn, even when he is approached by other Black people, many times people from his own district, questioning him about reparations, because that is a bill that he signed on to that hasn't gone any damn where. And I want to show you another reason that has turned more black voters off away from the Democratic Party. Listen to this.
For the past few years, we have been covering old James Clyburn, Representative James Clyburn, or better known as Jim Crow Clyburn. Now, people have been rolling up on him for a couple of years now, asking about reparations. And there's a current video, him once again speaking on reparations in the form of cash payments. But we need to go back a few years to establish a pattern with not only James Clyburn, but James Clyburn is one of the top brass in the Democrat Party. We're not talking about the Congressional Black Caucus. We're talking about the Democrat Party. You know, the party that most of you black folks in America swear allegiance to. The party that the majority of you black folks feel that Democrats voting for them is part of the culture. That's how a lot of you feel, literally. If you don't vote Democrat in the black community, on some critical thinking area, say, you know what, I don't think I want to fool with them. Let me just back off from that. Let me see what everybody got to offer. I don't want to deal with none of them. They will turn against you in the black community. This is how silly and asinine this community has gotten behind this one political party. But Clyburn is an issue, but he's not all the problem. And I'll get to that. So in the first clip, let's go back 4 years ago when somebody rolled up on Clyburn back in that time period and asked him about reparations. Let's go ahead and roll that one.
If you wait on cash payments to come out of reparations, you're going to wait forever. It's not going to happen. So what you've got to do, let me just talk. Don't put that in my face.
Why are you touching me?
Okay, all right. I'm going to leave you alone.
Cut the check.
And this type of behavior, I'm going to let play on, but he's done this multiple times. Now, he's telling you this clip is from 4 years ago. There are clips just from a couple of months ago with him with the same attitude. So what he said to that gentleman is that you're not going to get cash reparations. That's what he said to him. Now, part of like this bill that Jim Clyburn has approved and Ro Khanna has also approved, and I talked to Ro Khanna about this when he came on to the show, they're not including cash payments. They're trying to do little reforms. You know, it's like, yeah, we can fix up, you know, some of these systems and make it easier for people to get businesses and things like that, but not paying back the 40 acres and a mule, which was promised by General Sherman. They're not talking about that. They don't want to do that part, even though cash payments were given to Japanese people from the internment camps that were here in the United States. And that was done under Ronald Reagan. Look it up. Under Ronald Reagan, it was done. But when it comes to black people, not particularly black people, but Ados, descendants of slavery or freedmen, when it comes to that particular group, oh, hell no. We're not giving you any cash payments. So this is the attitude. This is the thing. Like, watch this.
So what you've got to do, let me just talk. Don't put that in my face.
Why are you touching me?
Okay, all right. I'm going to leave you alone.
Cut the check. Tell Nancy Pelosi to cut the check.
Yeah.
You do that for me?
She's the treasurer.
Cut the check. Somebody better cut the check. Well, reparations are owed, sir.
Talk to the
ADOS. You're not going to run away from this issue, Congressman.
Oh, I'm not trying to run away from it.
It seems like you are. You're walking away right now.
Oh.
As you heard on that clip, Clyburn said that by reparations with cash payments, you're not getting it. That's what he said.
They have become Clyburn, very cocky, condescending, and he's reacted this way to everyone. There was a video I showed a couple months ago where someone approached him about it and he said, "Get out of my face." And this is people continue to elect him. Continue to elect him. So the thing is this, people will say, well, we don't understand why are black voters, moving away from the Democratic Party. Did you see what I just showed you? Everybody else is put first. So when Black people are asking for concessions, are asking for demands, you have a Black politician who signed onto the reparation bill who's basically telling you to just get out my face. So what Dr. Umar Johnson is telling you, for those, whether you're Black or white, whoever is watching right now, regardless of your race, your gender, etc., why are you voting for people without asking for some type of concessions? Why are you voting for people without asking for some type of demands? What's it all for? It's something we all need to start thinking about. Everybody needs to start thinking about. Peter says truth is suppressed. This is true. Ethel says speak truth to power equals extreme. Christian says Umar be getting on my nerves, but he does make some good points sometimes. Yeah. He makes some good points. Like, I mean, in this one in particular, it's just, we have to get people out of this mindset that like, it's the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, and that's it. And that's your duty. We need to start looking outside the box. And in reference to like helping your community, neither one of these parties can do. If the best way that you can help your community is by organizing within your community, doing mutual aid, helping each other. That is the best way that you can help people within your community. You've seen it over and over again. Corrupt mayors, corrupt city councilmen, corrupt congressmen and women, corrupt presidents. All of these people are bought and paid for. They're corrupt. You can't trust them. Every now and then you get one or two people, a needle in a haystack that may do the right thing. Every now and then you get a Shama Sawan. Most of the time you don't. And that's how you got to look at it. Shout out to Case, Study QB. What's up, Case? Case is in the chat. But that's how you got to look at it. Most of the time they're all corrupt. JB says, like Janet Jackson said, what have you done for me lately? That's right. That is right. And yes, universal programs are a must. Yes, you still need those universal programs. But there are certain things that are specific to each community that people have made concessions for, people have made demands about, and they've received them. Everybody should be doing this. Something to think about. Okay, we are moving on to the next story. Max Blumenthal had an interesting event recently called TrueCon 2023. Now, during this event, I don't know how Max goes to these things and stays like more so calm. There's no way I could sit through all of this, like these events. But recently, he was at this event, TrueCon, and Rachel Maddow was one of the speakers at this event. And so kudos to Max Blumenthal for standing up to Rachel, because I don't think anyone else would have done this. Well, maybe Jose, but I don't think they would have invited Jose Vega to this event. But standing up to Rachel Maddow for the way that over the past, 6 years, she Russiagated the hell out of you. The hell out of you. So Max did confront her. Now he goes on to say, Rachel doesn't do Q&A from the audience. So I had to find another way to ask her about the relentless promotion of the most discredited hoaxes of Russiagate, from the Steele dossier to Russian bounties. She peered silently at my badge and security quickly pounced on me. Let's start with the video. We'll start from here. Here we go.
Bent on overthrowing the U.S. government. And members of Congress who were sympathetic.
Rachel, this speech is boring and paranoid. Can you explain why you promoted the Steele? Why did you promote the Steele dossier, which has been proven to be a lie? Why did you promote the lie of Russian bounties?
Come on, let's go.
Can you ever be held accountable for the lies you told Americans for years and years and years? You lied to Americans for years.
Let's go.
Silence is violence, Rachel.
You're out. You're out. It is bad.
Let's go.
There you go. You want my badge?
Thank you.
Here you go. I'm walking out with
You
you.
can go this way.
Which
Elevator
one?
right here.
Rachel Maddow refusing to answer questions about lying about the Steele dossier, lying about Russian bounties, and doing a paranoid speech claiming Nazism is afoot in America. And I'm being thrown out by security now. There was no Q&A. If there was Q&A, I would have politely asked a question.
So let's go back to the beginning. Watch this.
Bent on overthrowing the U.S. government. And members of Congress who were sympathetic.
Rachel, this speech is boring and paranoid. Can you explain why you promote?
So he said the speech is boring and paranoid. So because she didn't take Q&A, that's why he walked up to her. Now, Max was pretty bold, I would say. That's a pretty bold move. Because even Jose Vega doesn't walk up to the speakers, he stands up from where he is. But Max was like, nah, fuck this. Now watch this. Notice how she looks down at his badge.
Why did you promote the Steele dossier, which has been proven to be a lie? Why did you promote the lie of Russian bounties?
Come on, let's go.
Can you ever be held accountable for the lies you told Americans for years and years and years?
And it's important to point this out because she doesn't answer this question. She doesn't answer this question, and she hasn't been held accountable for it either. You know, so you can't, I don't know, you can't fault Max for that. He also goes on to say here, my attempt to question Maddow took place at the Lockheed Martin and Palantir sponsored Truman Project's National Conference. She had just given a paranoid and dull speech about Nazi infiltration of World War II era USA and how it parallels the Trump-Russia conspiracy theory here. So here was Rachel Maddow again, once again, Russia, Russia, Russia. It's like that episode of the Brady Bunch. Well, Jan goes, everybody's always talking about Marsha. It's always Marsha, Marsha, Marsha. It's like that. Like she continues to bring this up because she has nothing else to run on. She talked about Russiagate for years. For years. Has she apologized for that? She argued, didn't she argue before in front of Congress that she's not news, she's infotainment? Well, if that's the case, why is she giving a speech at this event? Now, Max went on to say, because there was another interruption that he had here, where he mentioned at Truman Kahn panel on diversity, equity, and inclusion featuring Pentagon officials, I asked how many equitable bombs produced by conference sponsors Lockheed Martin were dropped on kids of color in Palestine and Syria. So listen to this. This is interesting. Oh my God, I tell you. Oh boy, kudos to Max here. He was letting him have it.
Hello, Max Blumenthal, the Gray Zone. My pronouns are Trump Russia. Lockheed Martin has been identified as one of the most diverse employers in the country. And I was wondering if you knew by any chance how many products or weapons produced by Lockheed Martin, diversity and equity and inclusion bombs have been dropped on the children of Palestine, Yemen, or Syria. And also, do you happen to know off the top if any non-binary U.S. Navy divers were used in blowing up the Nord Stream pipelines?
Thank you. If anyone has that information, feel free to give us reason that you can give me the scoop too. That's build another question.
And they never want to answer the question about Nord Stream, by the way. They never want to go down that road. To send you a reminder of how bad Rachel Maddow did the Russia gating thing. Let me come here. I actually want to go to this one first. This is an old school one. This is when Jimmy was on TYT. Look, they were talking about this back then. This is Rachel Maddow, all Russia, all the time. And this video was 4 years ago. Just to give you a little bit of a reminder how much she talked about this.
Here's Rachel Maddow. You want to see how bad it's gotten? Someone put this together from just one episode of her show from last March, and I'm going to play it for you. Here we go.
Vladimir Putin, Russia hates Russia, Putin, Russia, Moscow, Russia, Russian, pro-Russian, the Russian, Moscow, Russia, Putin, Russia against us. Russians against the U.S. The Russian government scheme. The Russians, Vladimir Putin, Putin and Russia, Moscow, Russia, the Russians, Putin, Russia, the Soviet Empire, the second of the 20th century's great evils, communism, communism, Russia, assault by Russia,
Putin despises the West in general and the United States in particular, the Soviet Empire. Russia. They're the adversary. They want to bring us down, the Soviet Union.
Okay, that's all for that show. That was from one show.
That's crazy, isn't it? One episode. You know, if you say something enough, you say it multiple times over and over, eventually people will start to believe it. Little trick there.
So, and I just want to let you know, all that propaganda being pushed by the mainstream news and the establishment press and Rachel Maddow specifically, you know what the result of that is? If you go to my computer, the Gallup just did a poll. Less than 1% of Americans believe Russia is a top problem. Less than 1% of Americans. So when I say this on the show that no one in America cares about this, I'm not making it up. I actually travel to parts of the country, and I know that no one cares about this stuff, right? So this is a completely made up propaganda, and I'll just show you a little bit from this Gallup poll. It says less than 1% of Americans consider the situation with Russia a top problem for the United States, according to a Gallup poll released on July 18th. The number of Americans who consider Russia to be the biggest problem facing the country has not surpassed 1% in any of the past 7 months, the pollster found. While major news outlets have relentlessly pushed the Russian interference narrative for nearly 2 years, Americans remain overwhelmingly more concerned about domestic issues, with concerns about immigration and the government topping the list of the biggest problems. The lack of proof and the negligible concern from Americans on Russia issue may be contributing to, get this, to President Donald Trump's resilience in presidential approval polls.
She was basically a State Department mouthpiece. And since the majority of Americans didn't really care about it, then it's like, we got to continue saying it. Like, we have to keep saying it, because if we don't, then I don't know. If we don't, then it's not going to sink into people's heads. So we got to keep saying it. Now, Max also showed, I want to bring this up as well. Max also showed the sign that was outside the event. The Truman Project was created to cultivate rapidly pro-war, socially progressive Democratic politicians and policymakers. It's sponsored by a who's who of arm makers and security contractors. Look who's on the sign: Lockheed Martin, Palantir, Beacon Global Strategies, and Blue Star Strategies. So you know what this is all about. He shows the badges there. She's taking pictures of himself as they're coming to him. I was trying to find the picture. There was one picture we could just go back to that video I wanted to show you. There was something that she said after he gave his statement. She said, yeah, here we go. So that's her looking at his badge, his name tag. Let me figure out what outlet this guy works with. And so obviously she sees that he doesn't work with the New York Times or the Washington Post. He doesn't support the State Department. So she's like, oh, okay, so let me not take this guy seriously. But listen to what she says here. This is after Max was withdrawn. Listen to this.
Coming to a Substack newsletter near you.
You know what that means, right? You see that? This is what has happened to the Democratic Party. This is the elite smugness, condescending behavior that people, or more so the people that have been pushed to the front lines of the Democratic Party, this is what they have become. Smug, cocky, elite. What's wrong with Substack? What's wrong with Substack? There's more credibility with people who are writing for Substack than people writing for the New York Times. There's more credibility with people writing for Substack than people on MSNBC like you, Rachel. That's what the Democratic Party has become. Elite, snobby, smug. It's a hot mess. But there seems to be no accountability. Even The Guardian wrote about this. Now, this was 2019. Will Rachel Maddow face a reckoning over her Trump-Russia coverage? Even The Guardian had to do it. Listen to this. The worst kept secret in liberal media ecosystem is that Donald Trump is great for business. Rebranded for the resistance, liberal newspapers gobbled up thousands of new subscribers while local outlets die across America, unable to feast on the Trump mania. So we have to remember Trump was really good for ratings during that time. It goes on to say, at the top of the heap is none other than MSNBC's Rachel Maddow. Maddow, of course, was not alone. The New Yorker once ran a cover in Russian, a stunt that will age as terribly as all Cold War era red baiting has to our 21st century eyes. Last year, New York's magazine, Jonathan Chait, basically posited. Yes. Basically posited in another cover story that Trump may have been a Russian asset since 1987. CNN was a daily carousel of Russiagate pundits. Then it goes on to say down here, this part is important. Still, it's abundantly clear now that many liberal outlets overdid it in their fervor. And Maddow, MSNBC's ratings juggernaut of the Trump era, is the embodiment of this overzealousness. The Mueller investigation was covered more on MSNBC than any other television network and was mentioned virtually every day in 2018. No twist was too minuscule or outlandish for Maddow. Every night seemingly brought another nail in the coffin of the soon-to-be dead Trump presidency. This is The Guardian called this out. MSNBC did it the most. Let's go here. There was the time Maddow theorized that Trump was curiously well-versed in specific Russian talking points, strongly implying press briefings were dictated from the Kremlin. An American missile attack on Syria, Maddow concurred, could have been orchestrated by Putin himself. During a cold snap, the Russian government could shut down our power supply. Putin could blackmail Trump into pulling troops from Russia's border. Maddow was not only certain that Russians had rigged it. On air, she would talk about the continuing operation, the idea that the Kremlin was controlling the Trump presidency itself. Maddow is much smarter than this. But the siren song of ratings is too difficult for a TV personality to ignore, especially when a television network is transformed from an also ran into a top contender. It was all about ratings. Let's continue this up because it's getting us a lot of ratings. Who cares if we're telling the truth? There was never any accountability. In reference to the incident, that Max went to. Even Newsweek covered this incident, and this is really interesting the way they covered this. Even Newsweek, video of Rachel Maddow being confronted by Russiagate activists goes viral. First of all, look at how they define Max Blumenthal. First of all, they don't put his name in the title. That's intentional, by the way. 2, they refer to him as a Russiagate activist instead of a journalist. That's on purpose, to make it seem like he's someone that simps for Russia. You see this? This is horrible. It says here, blogger Max Blumenthal took on MSNBC host at TrueCon 2024. They refer to Max Blumenthal as a blogger instead of a journalist to diminish his credibility. If you can diminish his credibility, then people won't take the work that he's doing seriously. Isn't Max Blumenthal an investigative journalist? They know that people don't take blogger as seriously. That's why they use that term. Public event by the Truman Center held at the Marriott Marquis in D.C. This was Friday, June 2nd. Keynote speaker Maddow gave her speech to a room full of attendees when Blumenthal walked up the stage to complain about her coverage of the Steele dossier, yada, yada. And then they go on to say here, this is interesting. Blumenthal also attacked Maddow over coverage of Russian bounties paid to the Taliban leaders for dead American soldiers in Afghanistan. U.S. intelligence said in 2021, it found no conclusive evidence to support the claim. The American blogger has published articles on the Gray Zone website, which has promoted pro-Russian propaganda and content sympathetic to authoritarian regimes. Look at this. Here's the smear. Let me highlight this. Whoops. Here's the smear. He has also appeared on Russia state-owned news outlets RT and Sputnik. So have a lot of people. A lot of people have appeared on RT. A lot of people have appeared on Sputnik. But they're not going to tell their audience that. They want their audience to think that this is some far out there outlet that only like these crazy radical people go on to. No, they've talked to so many people. Are you kidding me? There's the smear. During the speech, Blumenthal said, Rachel, the speech is getting boring and paranoid, yada, yada. Then it goes on to say, they talk about the confrontation. The video has been seen by an estimated 1.3 million times and liked on more than 14,700 occasions, yada, yada. And then they talk about what else he said in the video. Newsweek has contacted Blumenthal via the Gray Zone website and the Truman Center for comment. So this article was published on the 4th, okay? This is today. This incident happened Friday. They said they contacted him for a comment. 9 times out of 10, he's probably not going to be able to come to you right now. Obviously, like Max is very busy. But this is crazy. They go on and continue to smear the Gray Zone. It says the Gray Zone has been previously been criticized by Elliot Higgins, founder of investigative journalism group Bellingcat. They go into that, yada, yada. But what's really interesting, now they bring in the China conspiracy. Blumenthal's outlet has also been criticized by numerous news outlets over its denial of China's repression. They're talking about the Uyghurs group, which, by the way, it says China denies allegations of human rights abuses. Human Rights Watch and other organizations have published reports that accuse Beijing of crimes against humanity. Crimes against humanity can be separate from this particular issue. So that is something I did say we showed on the show before. The State Department actually said they did not have evidence to prove that there was a genocide against the Uyghurs. I talked about that on this show months ago. This goes to show you how bad. By the way, these are the people that are considered journalists. So let's go on. At the end of the article, this is the funny part. Oh, those are comments there. Hold on. Request, reprint, and licensing, submit correction, or view editorial headlines. Maybe people should reach out to that to do that. There's plenty of comments there. But it's just, these are the journalists, guys. These aren't bloggers. This is the real news. This is who we're supposed to listen to. While Rachel Maddow is laughing at Substack articles. Now, Max was on Jimmy recently. I do want to play just a clip from that. Let me go ahead and I just want to fast forward there, where he did talk about this event a little bit here. So here we go.
What is true con, Max?
Well, first of all, it's a true con. Second of all, it is the conference of the Truman Center, which started out as a Truman National Security Project. And as you can see, it's sponsored by Global Merchants of Death and like Beacon Global Strategies, which is a consulting firm that advises both Republican and Democratic national security hardliners. So the Uniparty, Palantir, you can see there, they do predictive policing, pre-crime surveillance. They're founded by Peter Thiel. You would thought these people hate Peter Thiel, but they just like surveillance more, I guess.
Again,
Peter Thiel, that's the guy that owns Rumble, if I remember correctly.
Palantir, I mean, people aren't nerds. That's from the Lord of the Rings, that the wizard that was bad, it was a crystal.
We're going to scoot past Kurt. Sorry.
And so all the people in that conference are trying to kind of network, and many of them are, minorities or openly gay people who want to work in the Pentagon or work for national security contractors or the CIA, whatever.
We need more psychopaths of color.
Pretty much like they want to mass murder as many people of color abroad as possible, but doing so in the name of what they call DEI, or diversity, DIE, diversity, inclusion, and equity. Or was it DEI? Anyway,
DEI.
Is DEI, not die. It's I know, because we actually did that when I was in higher ed. I just want to correct that, because you're supposed to say it DEI, because if you say DIE, it's die. So it's diversity, equity, and inclusion. Sorry, just wanted to fix that there.
Maddow was the keynote speaker. And Maddow's speech was all about, it was so boring. And it was like,
what did you say at the first line?
His first line was, Maddow, this speech is boring and paranoid.
That was my favorite part.
I mean, give a little review. And she starts her speech at like Lake Geneva in 1931. The editor of Time magazine didn't like Jews in New York, so he moved there and started getting bags of cash from German Nazi sympathizers. And you can see where it's going. Then he opposed World War II. So she's building up to, if you oppose the Ukraine proxy war, you're a Nazi. You're probably getting paid by Russia. And then she started at the end, bringing it home, and she was summoning the waterworks. Here's why this really matters.
She was crying like that.
A prosecutor, she was like, you could see her summoning fake emotion. A prosecutor refuses to go after a president for political expediency, and we've been infiltrated by foreign powers. And that's when I just kind of got up and was like, enough of this crap.
Oh my.
Yeah. So basically, this was a conference for people like Rachel Maddow, people who want to continue to spew State Department talking points, people who are approved to do so. Again, she's not a journalist. She's making over like $30,000 they were paying her an episode. Is ridiculous how much they were paying her. And she lied to people for years. And again, there was no accountability, no repercussions because of what she did. But imagine if that was someone in independent media who sat up there and lied. First of all, we wouldn't have been able to get through that many years of telling the lie. YouTube would have removed us immediately. We would have been moved immediately in reference to independent media. Everything would have been shut down. Your PayPal, your Patreon, all of those things would have been removed from you. But Rachel Maddow was allowed to lie to you for years. And what happened? They gave her a raise. So it's something that we need to point out. I actually put something up about Rachel Maddow too, and then I'll get to Ohio. It was a meme. It was funny, or at least I thought it was funny. Yeah, there it is. I put this up about Rachel Maddow. It says Rachel Maddow makes $30,000 a day pretending to be a progressive liberal while reading neoliberal corporatist propaganda off a teleprompter in between commercials for big oil, big pharma, and the military industrial complex. Where's the lie? So there you go. So kudos to Max Blumenthal for standing up to Rachel Maddow. It needed to be said. Like, it needed to be said. It needs to be said. And people should continue to tell her, like, if you see her in public, like, let me be careful how I say this. If you get the opportunity to speak to Rachel Maddow, you should ask her, why did she lie to people for years about Russiagate? Ask her. Coming to a Substack near you. Ridiculous. Thank you for the super chat, Justin. Why not organize a group of people to take over city council and mayor? You can do that. You can. I mean, actually, I felt like that's what happened in Nevada, right? Social Democrats kind of like took over, but then the Democratic Party kicked them out or something. It's really a weird situation there. Oz says MSBS should be shuttered for their role in fomenting war and is culpable in the deaths of all involved. Pachico says Substack is journalism. Maddow's show is a deep state infomercial. There you go. Zombie in the air. Pro-establishment lies are forgiven. And Terry says, welcome to Propagandize America. That's right. There you go. Okay. We are continuing the ballot initiatives, ballot measures that we started discussing weeks and weeks ago. And we have now made it to Ohio. So I'm going to dive into a little bit of Ohio. Before I do so, if you haven't had a chance, don't forget to smash that like button. That helps me out with the algorithm. Thank you very much. Ohio is an interesting state. Citizens of Ohio may initiate state statutes, aka state laws, through the process of indirect initiative, meaning after a successful petition drive makes a stop at the Ohio legislator to give them a chance to adopt, to pass, or reject, and then goes to the ballot for voters to weigh in on. Once sufficient signatures have been collected, statutory initiatives are first presented to the Ohio General Assembly. If approved by the legislator unamended, the proposed statute becomes law. If not, petitioners must collect an additional round of signatures within 90 days in order to place the statute on the ballot. That second round of signature collection transitions from indirect initiative to direct initiative. Citizens of Ohio may also initiate constitutional amendments through the process of direct initiative, where successful petition drive proposed amendments proceed directly to the ballot for a vote of the people. The General Assembly may also propose amendments to people as legislatively referred constitutional amendments. There is a single subject rule in Ohio. Proposed measures must address only one subject. The Ohio Revised Code further clarifies this requirement by stating only one proposal of law or constitutional amendment to be proposed by the initiative petition shall be contained in an initiative petition to enable the voters to vote on that proposal separately. Again, we've run into this with other states as well. Same thing, that like they have this rule where you can't have multiple measures as one ballot measure. You can't include it with something else. So it has to be a single subject. So that's important. Monopolies. This is from Roger Meadows. Sabby, this is pure genius and unique in and of itself. I will add this to my CBI recipe. And it says, the Ohio Constitution gives a restriction on initiatives that institute monopolies or special privileges. This is important. The Ohio Ballot Board is required to investigate any proposed initiative and determine if it would create an economic monopoly or special privilege for any public entity, including individuals, corporations, and organizations. If the Ohio Ballot Board determines that the initiative would create such a monopoly or special privilege, 2 questions must be put on the ballot. So interesting. The second question must provide a summary of proposed initiatives and ask voters if they wish to approve it. Both questions must receive majority approval for the initiative to be enacted. Now, let's get to the number of signatures. For an initiated constitutional amendment, 10% of the votes cast for governor. Direct initiated statute, 6% of the votes cast for governor. Indirect initiated state statute, 3% of the votes for governor. And veto referendum, 6% for governor. So interesting. And now we're going to go ahead and get into this note here from Roger Meadows. There were no citizen initiatives, law, or amendments that made it to the ballot, only legislative referred constitutional amendments. This one is in reference to bail. Ohio issue 1, determining bail amount based on public safety amendment. A yes vote supported amending the Ohio Constitution to require courts to consider factors such as public safety, the seriousness of the offense, a person's criminal record, and a person's likelihood of returning to court when setting the amount of bail. This passed by 77.50%. So, this is interesting. This was supported by the Republican Party, mainly. That's what you see here. So State Representative Jeff Lair, State Senator Teresa Gavarone, and more. And then you can see candidate Max Miller for U.S. House also supported this measure. One of the arguments was Ohioans care about public safety, and I have no doubt that they will overwhelmingly support this amendment. So this was an amendment. This is important for people to understand. This was an amendment to their constitution. Crazy, huh? I think this is something to point to when people say that Ohio is, not necessarily longer a swing state. It's now red. This is something that you can point to in reference to that. That's crazy, dude. That's crazy. We really do need bail reform, like all across this country. Who opposed it? State Senator Cecile Thomas, who was a Democrat. Some of the organizations that opposed it was ACLU of Ohio, Buckeye Institute, and the Bail Project, to name a few. One of the arguments was the Constitution gives the Supreme Court the authority to set the rules for trial courts. This amendment would take away that authority by deleting a whole sentence of Article 1, Section 9. If we are to remain a free society, and if Ohio is to remain a good place to live, we cannot let one branch of government take over. The 3 branches must have separate powers to keep them accountable to us, the people. Man. Campaign finance money. This is what's important. There was over $465,000 that was spent to support this, and there was zero money spent to oppose it. So again, money talks, right? A lot of times they put up more money for these measures, they usually pass in that direction. Roger Meadows put a note here. It seems that with this amendment, they transfer judicial power away from the Ohio Supreme Court to the local courts, giving them the ability to set bail and abolish no bail for those who committed felonies, capital offenses, or poses substantial risk of serious physical harm to any person or to the community. This can be good. This can be bad. That is interesting. And then I think we have one more. We'll do that one on Tuesday. That one is the citizenship voting requirement amendment. So we'll finish that up on Tuesday. Eric, I'll go ahead and take that comment from Roger on Rockfin. Thank you so much for the tip on Rockfin, Roger Meadows. Regarding Al Sharpton, never forget, people, he wasn't just an informant for the FBI against the mob. I can understand that since they wanted him dead, it probably had to do with that protest he done in Bensonhurst, protesting for the racial slaying of Yusef Hawkins. He was a snitch to try to track down where Joanne Deborah Chesimard, aka Assata Shakur, was after her breakout from prison. Interesting. I did not know that about him. Ahmed Abafi recalls two separate occasions when he had a meeting with Al, when he brought a briefcase with him and set it up on the table, obviously positioning it. Then at a separate time, he was at Al's house and tried to get him to speak by his VCR. So after that, he stopped messing around with him afterwards. My guess, he came to them saying the mob wants to kill me. Okay, well, this is transactional. We want Assata. Your move. Wow. So Al Sharpton was a snitch. I guess that's not surprising. One more thing I do want to share with you guys before I head out. We have started those not the Boston ones, excuse me. We have started the RBN chapters, but I did send out information about the Boston one. So the deadline to fill out that Google form is the 10th. I just wanted to remind you guys. I'm going to show you that newsletter, and I'll send it out again just in case you missed it last time. Sign up for my newsletter, guys. That's how I communicate with people. Okay. That is the best way to kind of keep track of me. That's the best way to kind of keep track of me. But that Boston chapter, let me go ahead and share this screen here. Whee! Oh, there we go. Yeah, the Boston chapter. So if you sign up for my newsletter, all you have to do is just enter your email address. That's it. That's all you got to do. That's how you sign up for the newsletter. Then you'll receive other communication from me. So a lot of times people like ask me questions via email, but it's already been sent in a newsletter. So this is probably the best way to find information. But RBN Boston, local chapter, all of us, you guys know, we've talked about this before on RBN, that we started like these chapters to help people in the community. So I sent this out via email. There is a Google form. I'll send it again. Google form that is attached. Basically, we're launching RBN chapters in an effort to expand mutual aid efforts. If you would like to volunteer for the Boston chapter, please complete that Google form by June 10th, guys. Okay, so that's coming this week. Our first event for the Boston chapter will be a meet and greet mutual aid barbecue. And once you sign up, I'll send you more details after that deadline has passed. So I gather all your emails through the Google form, and then I'll send you the email. We'll meet. We'll have a meeting, whether it's virtual or whatever. And we'll brainstorm together with ideas. Again, like this is like horizontal. So bring your ideas, bring them with you. I'm not one of those people that's like, no, it has to be this way and that's it. I'm not like that. So when you go to see the form, and I'll share this again, I just don't like putting this form link on YouTube because YouTube is just weird sometimes. The Google form looks like this. It's going to ask for your email, your name. For some reason, it's emailed twice. I don't remember why. It's going to ask you if you want to volunteer for that very first event. Also, what would you like to do in reference to mutual aid? Once a month, we want to do this, at least for the Boston chapter. I can't speak for the other chapters, but I'm looking for people that can volunteer to do something at least once a month. So some of the things we mentioned: financial literacy, self-care, higher ed alternatives. That's one that I'll be doing. Mental health counseling. You must be licensed in Massachusetts. I don't want people coming for me. Okay. Housing and tenant rights. Grow your own food. Marxist theory. How to start a worker co-op. And if you want to do something else, you want to teach something else other, and then you can mention what that other would be. So again, I'm asking you to do this virtually once a month. Again, you're volunteering, so this is not something we would be paid for. But if you wanted to do this in person with people, you could. I just don't think it's going to be feasible for everybody. That's gas money. Some of you may not be able to get to people's locations. Then you got to find a room. And so I said, do it virtually. But, you know, we need people to help with these things, especially self-care, right? Meditation, yoga, stress relief. If you want to lead a virtual session once a month, you'll let me know which one you want to do, or you can do other and mention what the other is. This is your opportunity to bring your skills to the people. This is how we help the people. You find something that you're good at and you share that talent and you teach other people how to do it. Some of you may be musicians, right? Some of you, maybe you know how to play the piano. Maybe you know how to play the guitar. You can choose to give people free music lessons. And that's another big one, right? Because music lessons are not cheap. So that's another one. Okay. And then what else do I have? Would you like to volunteer for food and clothing drives? Yes or no? That's it. The form is very short and simple. I don't like asking a lot of questions. So after June 10th, I'll have all your emails collected. I will contact you via email. We'll get a meeting together with all the peeps. If you can't make it, I'll do another meeting with you separately, but we'll get a meeting together with everyone, figure out what works for everybody. But the number one thing we really got to strive for first is that first event. So if you live in the Boston area, one of the things I'm going to ask you in that meeting, where do you think we should have it? I was looking at JP because there's a lot of green space. And I also thought about the fact of we also have to think about weather. So there is a possibility it could rain. And if that happens, it may be best to do this inside, maybe at a community center or something like that. So bring your ideas, suggestions. I should start pushing out that GoFundMe for this sometime later this week, and we can get the funds to get things going. But that is the Boston chapter. So I'll send it again. Okay. Yes, I'll keep sending that until Friday because I know some of you reached out and said you didn't get a chance. Last comment on Rockfin, Eric, and then I got to head out. Thank you so much for the super chat, Roger. Rockfin also used that to make contacts to launch CBIs. Thank you. Okay, there it is. I was about to say, I don't know. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. We don't need bail reform. We need enforcement of the 6th Amendment so people are not lingering in jail or out on the street waiting for a court date, which is a direct violation of the 6th Amendment. The right to a speedy trial with no delay, more money for public defenders and judges is what is needed. There you go. That is well. Okie doke. I have a hard stop on Sunday, guys. So thank you so much for hanging with me. Hit the like if you didn't get a chance to do so. I will be back on Tuesday And it appears there's going to be a Twitter space with Elon Musk and RFK Jr. tomorrow at 2 p.m. That should be interesting. Maybe I'll have some news for you about that on Tuesday. Anywho, all right, guys, you know how we do this. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.